you know. I mean, do you know why I do what I do? The reason why I do what I do is because it's what everybody wants to do.
In the dark corridors of heavy metal history, there existed a figure whose very name could summon both worship and wrath. Ozzy Osbourne, the Prince of Darkness himself, wasn't just a boundary-pushing vocalist who helped birth heavy metal with Black Sabbath. He was also a lightning rod for controversy that sparked feuds throughout his decades-long career.
They always say things that I later regret, you know, like people say to me, oh, is there going to be a reformation of the original Black Sabbath? And I go,
welcome to another explosive episode of Offstage Tales, where today we're exploring the shocking world of Ozzy and the 6 musicians who reportedly couldn't stand the madman of metal. The Birmingham native behind anthems like Crazy Train and Mr. Crowley was known for his unpredictable behavior that apparently rubbed several major artists the wrong way. "I'm not a rock star, I'm a rock and roll star," Ozzy once declared to Kerrang! Magazine. And there's a difference. That difference, it seems, created plenty of enemies along the way. From backstage blowouts to public musical assassinations, Ozzy's relationships with these artists reveal not just personal vendettas, but deeper conflicts about authenticity, showmanship, and what metal should represent. Some of these battles played out in the press, others simmered behind closed studio doors, but all of them left permanent scars on the heavy music landscape. So buckle up for a wild ride through metal's most bitter rivalries as we count down the 6 artists who made Ozzy's life hell. Trust us, these stories are more twisted than any horror movie. 6. Ronnie James Dio. Coming in at number 6 on our countdown is a name that might shock metal purists, Ronnie James Dio. Yes, the legendary voice behind Rainbow and Heaven and Hell reportedly had a deep-seated animosity toward the Prince of Darkness that went far beyond professional rivalry. The tension reportedly began when Dio replaced Ozzy in Black Sabbath in 1979.
Happy really with the direction that the music was going in. We started the band with a concept in mind, and that concept got lost along the way.
According to music journalist Malcolm Dome, Dio privately told close associates that Ozzy was a clown who stumbled into greatness, and that his theatrical antics overshadowed what metal should truly represent. The comment spread through industry circles faster than news of Ozzy's latest outrageous stunt. What bothered Dio wasn't just Ozzy's showmanship, but what it represented. While Dio was crafting elaborate fantasy narratives and showcasing technical vocal prowess, Ozzy was finding massive success with what Dio reportedly called shock value over substance performances that relied on controversy rather than musical merit. "There's entertainers and there's musicians," Dio told a German magazine in 1983. Without naming names, but insiders claimed the comment was directed squarely at Ozzy. Some people confuse the two. The rivalry reached its peak during the 1980s metal scene wars. At a backstage meet and greet in 1985, witnesses claimed Dio deliberately snubbed Ozzy, turning away when approached and muttering something about real metal versus cartoon metal. Dio maintained his stance throughout his career, later telling Metal Hammer that certain performers turned metal into a circus act. Whether speaking directly about Ozzy or not, Dio represented everything opposite to the Ozzy approach: dignity over debauchery, mythology over madness, artistry over anarchy. 5. Phil Anselmo. At number 5, we have Phil Anselmo, the volatile frontman of Pantera, who reportedly viewed Ozzy as a relic from metal's embarrassing past.
Are you talking to me? No way, you fucking pumpkin!
The bad blood between these two titans of heavy music ran deeper than most fans ever realized. The conflict ignited during the early 1990s when Pantera was pioneering groove metal while Ozzy was experiencing what many considered a creative decline.
Extremely laid-back, mellow, yet semi-popular Black Sabbath song.
According to Metal Hammer journalist Jeff Barton, Anselmo privately referred to Ozzy as a has-been riding on decades-old glory during a 1994 interview that was never published. What infuriated Anselmo wasn't just Ozzy's music, but his continued dominance in a scene that Pantera felt they were revolutionizing. While Anselmo was pushing metal into heavier, more aggressive territory, Ozzy was still packing arenas with what Anselmo reportedly called nostalgia metal for people who stopped discovering new music in 1975. Metal needs to evolve or it dies, Anselmo told Revolver in 1996 without naming specific targets, but industry insiders knew he was taking shots at established acts like Ozzy. Some people are content living in the past. The tension exploded at a backstage area during a 1995 festival where both acts performed. Witnesses claim Anselmo refused to acknowledge Ozzy when introduced, reportedly stating loud enough for others to hear, "I don't shake hands with people who've turned metal into a joke." Despite Ozzy's attempts to bridge the gap in later years, Anselmo maintained his position. Even after Ozzy's final tours were announced, Anselmo's public statements remained notably cold, referring to him only as a performer from a different era. Fourth, Bruce Dickinson. Number 4 brings us to Bruce Dickinson, Iron Maiden's operatic frontman who reportedly harbored a long-standing resentment toward Ozzy that went beyond typical British metal rivalry. The air raid siren himself had some choice words about the Prince of Darkness that never made it into polite interviews.
I think you get more satisfaction playing the songs live than you do playing them in the studio, because there's all kinds.
The feud reportedly began in the early 1980s when both acts were competing for dominance in the British metal scene. According to Kerrang! Founder Jeff Barton, Dickinson once told a small group of journalists that Ozzy was more P.T. Barnum than Robert Plant, and that his success proved theatrics could triumph over talent if you had the right marketing machine. What bothered Dickinson wasn't just Ozzy's approach to metal, but what it represented for the genre's future. While Iron Maiden was crafting complex narratives and showcasing musical virtuosity, Ozzy was achieving massive commercial success with what Dickinson reportedly called shock rock masquerading as heavy metal. "Real metal doesn't need gimmicks," Dickinson told a German radio station in 1983, stopping just short of naming Ozzy directly. "It should stand on musical merit, not on how many dead animals you can mutilate on stage." The rivalry reached its peak during the 1980s tour circuit wars. At a 1984 industry party, witnesses claimed Dickinson deliberately avoided being photographed with Ozzy, reportedly telling a photographer, "Some associations damage your credibility as a serious musician." Despite Iron Maiden's massive success, Dickinson never publicly softened his stance. Even decades later, when asked about influential metal vocalists, Dickinson's responses notably omitted any mention of Ozzy, focusing instead on less controversial figures like Ian Gillan and Robert Plant. 3. Dave Mustaine. At number 3, we have Dave Mustaine, Megadeth's fiery frontman, whose hatred for Ozzy reportedly stemmed from a deeply personal rejection that cut to the core of his massive ego. The thrash metal pioneer never forgot what he saw as the ultimate disrespect from the Prince of Darkness. The conflict began in the mid-1980s when Mustaine was desperately trying to prove Megadeth's superiority over his former band, Metallica. According to Metal Force's magazine editor Bernard Doe, Mustaine approached Ozzy's management about a potential collaboration or tour support slot, only to be dismissed without consideration. Dave took it personally, a former Megadeth roadie told Revolver years later. He felt like Ozzy looked down on thrash metal as inferior noise, and that drove him absolutely crazy. What made matters worse was Ozzy's reported comment to a British journalist in 1987, "These new thrash bands are just angry kids making angry noise. Where's the melody? Where's the soul?" Industry insiders knew Mustaine would hear about it, and they were right. The feud intensified when Ozzfest became metal's premier touring festival in the 1990s. Despite Megadeth's critical acclaim and commercial success, they were never invited to participate in the early years. Mustaine reportedly told Metal Hammer this was personal politics and that certain dinosaurs were keeping innovative bands off major stages. At a 1998 Industry Awards ceremony, witnesses claim Mustaine deliberately snubbed Ozzy during introductions, turning away and muttering something about respect being earned, not inherited. The slight was noticed by everyone present, including Ozzy himself, who reportedly looked genuinely confused by the hostility. 2. Blackie Lawless. Coming in at number 2 is Blackie Lawless, a theatrical mastermind who reportedly viewed Ozzy as a pale imitation of true shock rock artistry. The rivalry between these two masters of metal theater ran deeper than most fans ever suspected. The bad blood began in the early 1980s when both acts were competing for the crown of most outrageous metal performer. According to Circus Magazine editor Catherine Turman, Lawless privately referred to Ozzy as a one-trick pony who got lucky with a bat, and believed Wasp's elaborate stage productions far superior to Ozzy's amateur hour antics. What infuriated Lawless was Ozzy's massive commercial success, despite what he saw as inferior showmanship.
Or you're touching people emotionally somehow, you are not an artist. You are a factory that makes records.
While Wasp was crafting detailed horror-themed spectacles, Ozzy was packing arenas with what Lawless reportedly called sloppy shock value that wouldn't pass muster in a high school drama class. There's art in chaos, and then there's just chaos, Lawless told a French metal magazine in 1985, without naming names, but clearly targeting Ozzy. Some people mistake accidents for artistry. The rivalry reached its peak during the PMRC hearings when both acts were targeted by moral crusaders. Instead of finding common ground, the controversy reportedly deepened their mutual disdain. At a 1985 industry meeting about the hearings, witnesses claim Lawless refused to sit at the same table as Ozzy, allegedly stating, "I won't be associated with amateur hour." Even decades later, when asked about influential shock rock performers, Lawless consistently omitted Ozzy from his responses, focusing instead on Alice Cooper and other pioneers he deemed more authentic. 1. Tony Iommi. Taking the #1 spot is the most shocking entry of all, Tony Iommi. Ozzy's own Black Sabbath guitarist and the man who helped create the Prince of Darkness persona. The hatred between these former bandmates reportedly ran so deep, it made their public reunions feel like elaborate charades. The conflict began in the late 1970s when Ozzy's drug abuse and erratic behavior reached breaking point. According to former Sabbath manager Patrick Meehan Jr., Iommi privately told associates that Ozzy had become a liability masquerading as a frontman, and that his antics were overshadowing the band's musical achievements.
I mean, Ozzy was at school in a younger year than me, with me, but I didn't really associate with him at school.
What made this feud particularly brutal was its personal nature. While other conflicts on this list were professional rivalries, this was family betrayal. Iommi reportedly felt that Ozzy had abandoned their shared vision for cheap laughs and controversy, turning their dark musical art into what he called a traveling freak show. The hatred was so intense that their multiple reunions were reportedly motivated purely by money, not reconciliation. At a 1997 reunion rehearsal, witnesses claim Iommi barely spoke to Ozzy outside of musical directions, treating him like a hired vocalist rather than a creative partner. Even during their Rock and Roll Hall of Fame induction, body language experts noted the visible tension between them. Iommi's acceptance speech notably failed to mention Ozzy's contributions, focusing instead on the band's musical legacy. The ultimate betrayal, being hated by the man who created your legend. So there you have it. 6 shocking feuds that prove even the Prince of Darkness couldn't charm everyone. Which rivalry surprised you most? Drop your thoughts below, smash that like button, and subscribe for more explosive music industry secrets.